touch the walls of your house and they are cold, you have the well-known cold wall effect. If you want to avoid it, stay and watch this video, because I'm going to talk about the new thermal insulation. Let's get started. The other day, I installed a new thermal insulation system in the apartment that I had never installed before. This system allows to optimize the wall insulation and thus avoid the cold wall effect. I had a large wall in the dining room that faces the outside and has a large window, which I will change later. And being so exposed, I noticed that this wall was excessively cold, that the cool air was coming in through there. First, let's specify what this system consists of. It consists of combining a series of insulating plates with an insulating mortar, which together gives us a series of advantages in terms of insulation. This system would be the one to replace the SATE system. The difference is that the SATE is placed on the outside and this one is placed on the inside of the house. But why would we choose this system over the SATE? Well, we have three reasons. The first one would be because we can't agree with the neighbors. To install the SATE system as it is on the outside of the house, there has to be an agreement from all the neighbors. The next reason would be because our building is historic and we can't change the facade. And the last reason would be, well, because we live in a house. We want to do it ourselves and we don't want to rent a scaffold to install the SATE system on the outside. In this way, we can do it more easily from the inside of our home. What are the advantages of the TERMIN system? Well, the main advantage would be that we are going to be warmer at home, because not so much cold will enter from outside, and therefore we will save on energy consumption. The next advantage would be the fact, precisely what we have talked about, of avoiding the cold wall effect. It allows to minimize this effect on the surfaces where we place it, and therefore prevents the appearance of dampness due to surface condensation. And finally, we would find the advantage of reducing thermal bridges. In the placement of a blind or, for example, a lintel, some of the heat we have at home can be lost. Well, with this system, we would insulate this small gap that we have and guarantee greater energy efficiency. But what is the difference between the advantages of the Termin system and other types of insulation? Many insulation types exist on the market, and the most well-known is probably the installation of drywall and placing rock wool in the middle. Well, I think the main advantage would be the space it takes away from you. That is, the Termin system requires a minimum total thickness of 15 millimeters, which would be 1.5 centimeters. While other systems require application thicknesses of more than 5 centimeters. So this system allows to preserve the space to be renovated. As for the plasterboard structure, if we were to place plasterboard, we would have to consider the space that we are subtracting with the floor channel, plus the plasterboard plate, which in this case could be 1-2, but if we put double plasterboard plate, then it would be double the space to remove. We're talking about the Termin system taking up this much space, while the plasterboard could take up to 10 centimeters. What materials do we need to apply? First would be the 9mm thick insulation plates. The next thing would be the fine interior plaster, and finally the fiberglass mesh. How do we place it? What is the process that needs to be followed? It's simple. First, prepare the mortar, the fine interior plaster. Use 6 liters of water for each 15-kilogram bag. We mix the material and water well with an electric mixer at low speed until we get a consistent, homogeneous paste without lumps. It's important not to stir it again once we've started the setting process. We can use this mortar for approximately 2 hours, preferably at a temperature around 20 degrees. This mortar has high adhesion, it's lightweight and has low water absorption, it's permeable to water vapor and is reinforced with fibers. The next thing we're going to do, once we've taken the mortar and applied it to our wall, is to place the insulation panels. The panels should be arranged continuously and stably from bottom to top and starting from the corners, where whole and half panels will be placed alternately. It's important that the panels are placed in a staggered manner. This way continuous joints are not produced, for example at doors and windows. It's also very important to place the panels, avoiding the material from overflowing the edges of the panel. In case the joints exceed 1.5 millimeters, we must fill it with the same material so that the entire wall is completely covered. The next step would be reinforcement. How are we going to reinforce it? Well, with the fiberglass mesh that we have discussed, we must apply the fine interior plaster with the trowel and embed the fiberglass mesh. And finally, the last coat that we are going to give is again of mortar. To finish covering all the mesh and to have the wall, well, totally fine, smooth and beautiful. This last reinforcement coat should be no more than 3 millimeters thick. To finish and complete this wall that is turning out so beautiful, we are going to give it a paint job. First, we are going to apply a primer, which in this case would be fixed acryl. And after applying this primer, we would move on to the paint. And to finish, we are going to have a section for questions and tips. The first would be if it is easy to place, which I suppose many of you are wondering if we found it easy to place it. Well, I don't think it's hard to place, but I do think you have to be handy, since the last layer that needs to be placed has to look pretty good, even though we can then sand it and make it perfect. It is true it has to be, well, good. So, if you are a bit handy, then this last layer of final finish will look better. What if you're not handy and you're more of a klutz? Well, it wouldn't matter either, because then we sand it down and make it look good. But we will have to work a lot more than if we already leave this wall reasonably well. A tip that I can give you to make it easier and more fluid? The placement is to first cut the plates or the mesh before placing the mortar, since cutting them takes a little while and the mortar can start to set before we have finished cutting them. So it's better to cut, apply mortar, and then place the plates with the mesh. Another tip would be to place it between two people. It's always better than one alone, as one can be cutting and the other can be applying the mortar on the wall. We'll move faster and things will get easier. Another thing to keep in mind is that we should apply this system before changing the doors and windows. If we have already changed them or have no intention of changing them, then we can leave it as is and finish it off along with the door. What I would do in this case is to remove the embellishments from both the window and the door, depending on where we are going to place it. We install this system and then we fit the embellishment back in, so it covers the joint and the finish of the door with the new system. It's not just about it being well finished, but also about it getting dirty. If we don't need to change it, we must protect it. In this apartment, we haven't protected it because we have to change it, as I mentioned. So there was no problem if it got dirty or stained. Another very important thing is to cover the floor very well so it doesn't get stained, as it's quite difficult to apply mortar without it falling on the floor. Since we're going to end up changing it, we haven't protected it. But if you want to keep the same floor, you should protect it well. And finally, make sure you have a notched trowel. We had everything and then we realized we were missing the notched trowel. Minor details are often overlooked, but it would be best to make a list of materials, go buy them, and then have them all ready at home. And would this be the new system? The experience we've had with him. Over time, I'll tell you more. As winter comes more, well, how is the insulation in this case? I hope you found it useful to see an alternative to the placement of drywall and rock wool. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like it. See you in upcoming videos.